We always like to start the show with samples, and I'm afraid this is out of my courtyard, our
very
courtyard.
own courtyard, Kim.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is what Kim was complaining about last week, because
Right.
I went over there and it was amazing that this sugar maple has all these glossy leaves, as you may notice. I hope they're flickering in the spotlights here. But all those glossy leaves suggest something. That, first of all, the gloss is called honeydew. It's produced by insects such as aphids and leafhoppers and scale insects. And so when I went under that tree, there were so many leafhoppers last week, I could not believe it. You had to hold your breath so you wouldn't breathe any down. But anyway, not as many, but there's some evidence that they're still here. But the main problem with the glossiness or that honeydew is, I'll go over here, I'm going to point to a more of a mature scale insect, and that is a cottony maple scale. And if you move a little bit over to the right on the screen here, this is an immature one. So this is the more mature one laying eggs in that frothy little sac there. And the one over here is still immature. And they kick out honeydew like you can't believe. And it just scatters everywhere. They don't want parasites and predators to find them, so they just kick it out as far as they can, and so you get this nice sheen all over the foliage. And over here is, I notice, I'll turn this around this way, but we have one leafhopper that decided to remain right there, an adult leafhopper. So they're the ones that cause all this problem. Now, lots of times we think, when we look at some problem, we think there's always one answer. What caused this? How do I get rid of it? Well, in this case, we have at least two explanations for the foliage the way it is, but still, the foliage doesn't look that bad, does it?
Nope.
I mean, I think the tree is fairly large, and I think it can tolerate all of this mess. More of an aesthetic issue, so not so much of a detriment. So just wanted to point that out.
Excellent. Thank you, Jim. And no, we're not going to spray it.
Very good.
All right, Dennis, no snakes.
No, not today. We're going to be a little batty.
Oh, boy.
Okay. We've been getting a lot of people have been calling me and coming up with to identify the scat, because people are constantly sending me scat. And if you look at this scat, its point on one end is kind of sparkly. This is bat scat, okay, or the droppings of bats. And if you have some lights around your porch or whatnot, they'll be flying by that area, picking up the insects. And as, of course, once you eat, you have to defecate. And so they're leaving this bat scat around, and people find it every morning. And it's just that something that is going to be there, and the bats usually don't cause too much of a problem unless they're in your attic or in part of your dwelling where you might want to get them out. If they're in the dwelling, it's July, and if you've ever heard me before talk about bats, is let them fly till July. Well, it's the end of July, so it's time to do something. And one of the things you can do is exclude them. And so if you know where the bats are coming in and out, there's several types of excluders. This one goes against the house, and the bats can go out but can't come back in, and then you can seal the hole a couple of weeks later. This one's for inside of a corner crevice. The bats will come out and then do not figure out how to come back in. And a third one looks like this to stop the bats from coming back in. So once you've put these devices up, which you can do after July because all the babies are growing and flying, then you can patch the holes up. And bats can't chew through anything. So anything you use to patch it, whether it's a foam, whether it's duct tape, or whether it's caulking, will stop the bats from getting back in there. The key is find out where all the entries are and plug them up after the bats have left the attic.
Excellent. After the bats are out of the belfry. All right, Lauren.
Well, I brought along a sample. This actually came from, I believe, Kearney, Nebraska. It was sent in. And it's a pretty nice example of something a lot of people could see in trees. Many times you'll see a portion of the tree or maybe even the whole tree that's not looking, like things are growing right. In this case, we've got a lot of chlorosis and chlorotic areas on the leaves. Some of them are even black. You might even think that's like a sooty mold or something growing on there. Actually, this one in particular, when we took a closer look, the black areas weren't even mold. I think it's some sort of just like related to all nutritional deficiency on this. And my thought on this is there's not really any evidence of a canker. Many times when you have a branch that looks like this on a tree, or if the whole tree's this way, you'll see some swollen area that's affected by some sort of fungal infection most of the time. And then when you remove that, the rest of the tree's fine. But in this case, the whole tree apparently is like this. So I would suggest it's probably related to nutrient deficiency. It may even be something that wasn't correctly planted 3 years ago if it's a younger tree. But in any event, it's basically just nutritional. It looks like it could be a disease, but no evidence of disease in this case. But just look at it's a good time of year to look at your landscape and your larger plants to see if you see certain areas of the crown being affected. Get in there and look for cankers and get those pruned out.
Excellent. Or dig and find out what's going on.
Or dig and find out, yeah. In this case, I think I'd be digging around it if they don't know the history of it.
Excellent. Thank you, Lauren. All right, Elizabeth, our favorite squashy thing.
Favorite squashy thing, and I am a fan of zucchini. And when it comes to zucchini squash, it's best to know what you're dealing with. So what's normal, what's not normal, what happens to be going on in your garden. Now, if some people look at this light colored one, you think, oh, that's not quite right. That's a light limey yellow color. The variety will make a big difference in what the zucchini is supposed to look like. So this is normal. This, on the other hand, is supposed to be a dark green with light green midveins that's supposed to be cylindrical the entire way and not squishy.
Ick.
What this one is this one is a Romanesco, and it has what we call blossom end rot, which, go figure, blossom end is rotting. So blossom end rot is caused by a calcium deficiency in the fruit. What happens is it's usually an early season thing we see in tomatoes, but at this point in time, we'll see it in zucchini, and a lot of it has to do with not maintaining that soil moisture properly. So one way to help may have healthy looking zucchini instead of squishy zucchini is to make sure that you have your zucchini mulched, that you're trying to maintain adequate moisture throughout the growing season. And if you start to have ones that don't look quite right or they're not filling out quite right, go and investigate that. And if it's squishy, blossom end rot, pull it off before it starts to rot. If it's still solid, it just might be that, you know, the heat got to it and just hasn't had that opportunity to fill out all the way yet. So really know what varieties you have and what's normal and what's not normal for those varieties in the garden.
Excellent, and look forward to zucchini bread. All right, Jim, you get the first picture question. This is a Lincoln viewer, and the only question was pest or harmless. And it's that little insect in the middle there.
Almost actual size on the screen. That's called a Harlequin bug, or you might say Harlequin bug. Harlequin bugs are a notorious pest of the cabbage type crops. So you think of cabbages and broccoli and the like. So when it shows up, you know, it's important just to take notice and see if you can remove the adults, because they will lay these they're really pretty barrel-shaped eggs all stacked together, you know, on end. And if you see those on the undersides of the leaves, pick those off. And so you're manually trying to keep the numbers of Harlequin bugs down. Their populations go up and down depending on the year. So it may not be a serious year, but it's a good reason to be out in those cruciferous cabbage type crops and looking for a Harlequin bug so it doesn't overcome you or overwhelm you.
Excellent, thank you, Jim. All right, first critter.
Okay.
This is a very neat set of pictures. It's an Omaha viewer. And he says for the past few days, 4 of these guys have been hanging around. He thinks it's Cooper's hawks.
Yeah.
He's got ponds, he's got patio furniture, and his questions for you are, do they eat fish and or squirrels, and are they planning on eating his and then moving in?
Well, I'm not an animal whisperer, so I can't tell you what they're planning. But I can tell you the habits of the Cooper's hawk, which this very much looks like a Cooper's hawk. The only other thing it could be is a sharp shin
Say that
hawk.
several times.
Yeah, it's a Cooper's hawk. Their main diet is other birds, especially starlings, which are a pest species that's invasive. So their biggest diet in these urbanized areas is the starling. So therefore, extremely beneficial. Plus, they are a bird of prey and are protected. So you cannot do anything. In fact, even if one dies, you can't pick up its feather or its carcass without first getting a permit. So I would say, slight chance that, you know, if they can't find enough starlings, they might go after a small squirrel or a small rabbit. But there's plenty of small squirrels and small rabbits. There's not enough hawks. So chances are it's not going to go after your fish. And so I would say enjoy it. Enjoy it very much. And the reason why they may be not afraid of you is because they know they don't have to be.
There you go. Perfect. All right, speaking of blossom end rot, Lauren, we had 2 or 3 viewers send us pictures that look like this. And it's either on green fruit or a little bit of the ones that are in the breaker stage. This happens to be celebrity, according to this viewer.
And Elizabeth did a great job just a little bit earlier describing blossom end rot and how to manage it. I think really why you're seeing it right now is this cycle that we've had in the last week, even where we had some real hot, dry conditions here in the last week, and that really makes that water availability and consistency harder to do. So I'll never forget one of my first times on Backyard Farmer talking about that being botrytis for a long time and
Whoops.
how bad it was, and that wasn't correct, but that is blossom end rot.
All right. Thank you, Lauren. All right, Elizabeth, your pictures, 2 pictures from 2 different viewers of this one actually came from Texas, which is very cool. Red Oak, Texas, no less. They want to know what it is. And then the second one was a viewer who said this is the remains of a hail-damaged jack in the pulpit, and they wondered what is going on with that thing in the middle.
The first one, it looks like it's a type of arum, A-R-U-M. Looks kind of like an arrow leaf on that, and what happens is it's one of the ones that'll go summer dormant, but that is actually the seed pod from that. So that's a really fun one, has that bright reddish kind of color, really fun to kind of look at and really unusual. The next one is that jack in the pulpit, and the good news is even though it's been hail damaged, that is actually the seed pod as well. So you still have some fun seed pods to look at. They'll still turn bright red. The thing to keep in mind is they are poisonous, so if you have little people that like to run around or big people like Dennis that like to run around and eat things from the landscape, you need to be careful that they can be poisonous.
All right, Jim, you get the second picture, and this one is also, just for Jim.
Okay, yeah.
So what is that one?
Well, those are early stage caterpillars of the black swallowtail. And of course, as they get older, the good one there, as they get older, they look like that. They're more of a striped green-black with a little bit of yellow-orange in it. But they love parsley and carrot tops and what about dill and all these other things that are closely related to each other. And they don't usually compete with you on how much there is, and so if you can share and let them go ahead and develop, they will disappear and they will pupate somewhere, and then a week later, you'll have beautiful swallowtails to enjoy in the landscape.
Like the ones all over the butterfly bushes by your
Right,
building.
right,
you go.
And
exactly.
evidently you're like Carrot Top the comedian.
No, not really.
All right, Dennis, your second picture. This is a Riverdale, Nebraska area viewer.
Okay.
They found a rather large hole next to a bur oak, and they noticed a root chewed through along with a few smaller ones. They're wanting to know what to do for the tree, but they're also, what kind of a creature do you think dug that thing?
Well, it's been rained on quite a bit since it was dug, so it's hard to see the paw prints or claw prints, and the chewing looks more like a snap than an actual gnawing, but I can see a little bit of gnawing in this picture. Something that big, I would say, could be a woodchuck, but it's not typical of a woodchuck. It's too big to be a vole or a ground squirrel. So if they have pocket gophers in the area, it may have been pocket gopher damage. And pocket gopher is notorious for doing root damage in the winter. And then when and they have a burrow, and what might have happened, the pocket gophers might have eaten that root, which has a lot of nice starch and vascular material. And then there's a burrow underneath there, and then what happened in the spring when we had a lot of rain, that burrow collapsed, and that's what you're seeing now. So from what the information we have, the little bit of data you've given, I would say pocket gopher, look for mounds, or it might have just been coming through in the winter, and it collapsed, showing you what it was doing underground during the winter months.
So just fill in that hole and watch
Yeah, fill it in
the
for
critter.
now and watch it.
Okay, excellent. All right, Lauren, you also have a tree question, which I know are your favorite.
Get out the chainsaw.
This is a Portsmouth, Iowa viewer who has a beautiful green spire linden. The top is fine. It's planted in 2000. She's seeing this sort of crumbly, growthy stuff at the base. she wonders what it is. I mean, it just crumbles off in her hand, and whether they should do anything a little different, or what do you think here?
Yeah, and I was looking at this, trying to tell from the picture, it does look like some sort of a fungal thing that's going on there where it's growing out. I can't tell what it is. There are a lot of different fungi that will infect the deadwood inside of a tree once it gets larger. Linden's not really notorious for having a lot of deadwood inside though, so it's kind of questionable. But with that, that's what I would suggest it probably is. It looks like in the landscape though, the good news is that it's not in an area where it's a hazard tree. If that was next to a home or somewhere where it would fall and be on the house, I would, question removal on that and possibly doing that and recommend that. But with this case, I would just, try to watch it, make sure if you can, just maintain, good moisture and growth for it. And that's about the best thing you'll be able to do with that and let it go. There's not really any treatments you could do for that.
All right, thank you, Lauren. Elizabeth, we have an Alliance viewer who has a cactus, a big one, on the west side of her house. It was 3 feet tall 10 years ago. Now it's way above that. She's staking it, bolting it to the house. It's about 10 feet tall. She wants to know if she should prune it, get up on the roof the next time. What do we think here? It's obviously hardy, right?
That is one of the hardy cactus. I think it's one they call Cylindropuntia. It's related kind of to a prickly pear, but not really. That species is supposed to get 10 foot tall. So, if it happens to get taller, you can prune cactus, but you have to do so very carefully, especially those types with all the big thorns. We're talking large leather gloves. I would use a pole pruner if it was me and stand back and cut, because those are full of water and they're very heavy, and it's going to come down on something and it's going to hurt. The good news is you let those scab over for about a week, and then you can replant them, and then you've got a whole nother set of plants that you can share with friends or however many viewers want to grow that cactus after seeing it on the Backyard Farmer. But it can be pruned. Prune at your own risk.
A viewer has called in a question about squash bugs, and what is the best way to keep them from living during the winter and the spring? Is it spray, or do they overwinter, I think?
Well, they overwinter as adults, and they're going to be in like shelter belts, down in leaf litter and the like, so they're going to be really hard to find. So there's no point in trying to control them there. They're lazy, and they come into the patch, the garden, in June sometimes. So the best thing, of course, is to look out for them and remove them as you see them. I think for most homeowners, that's a pretty easy job to do, and then look for those football-shaped eggs, in masses of bronzy colored on the underside of the leaves, and just tear off that part of the leaf or just remove them. Early on, if you let things get too far along, you have the young nymphs, and those can be easily controlled. They're just grayish colored, and they hang out together because they're inexperienced. And so, you can hit them with a shot of insecticidal soap or some other mild type of insecticide instead of the heavy-duty stuff, because it really is hard to control the adults. So I'd check out those procedures and try that out.
Excellent, thanks, Jim. An Omaha viewer,
Okay.
wild turkeys. And apparently they're leaving presents on the front steps.
Oh, really?
Scat man. So
Yeah,
how do you keep them from doing that?
Usually around my neighborhood, they just leave their scat. If they're leaving presents, that's a good thing. Okay. A tough one. Very tough. There's several things that can be used for hazing sometimes a turkey. If you've gotten a permit and you've captured a turkey or shot a turkey, for hunting, and you clean that carcass and you hang it nearby, some people say that makes them go away, but I know it stops turkey vultures, but it may also be stopping the turkeys. There isn't any good repellent, okay? Having a dog or, an animal, cats probably wouldn't scare turkeys too well, but having a neighborhood dog or a dog in the yard would be very helpful. Other than that, it's a matter of getting the hose out and getting the scat off every time.
Oh boy.
There is no toxicant legally available. and there's no repellent that really is efficient.
Are there things like motion alarms or anything like that?
Yeah, they
Too
don't
small
seem
for
to,
a kid?
yeah, that's another type of hazing, those motion alarms, but they're very temporary. They become habituated to, and things like blow up owls or blow up snakes, they don't work. Don't
All
waste
right.
your money.
Thanks. Just threaten them with Thanksgiving dinner. Maybe
Yeah.
that'll work. Okay, a Red Oak, Iowa viewer, Lauren, has blue spruce, 10 to 15-year-old trees. They're turning brown from the bottom up, and then individual branches are also dying. Without
Okay.
a picture, is there any way we can?
Without a picture, a couple things that I have seen on spruce like that, there are some needle cast diseases that would work from the inside out. Many times that would be sided, one side or the other. Also, individual branches, there are some cankers, so look back on those branches if you have a specific one that's affected. Look for an area, many times on spruce, it'll be an area a couple inches long with some little brown dots in it. And the fruiting structures of the fungus that would do that. The other thing when I think about spruce and I hear about this type of thing would be spider mites too.
Yeah.
So I mean that would be the other thing to look for would be
Again,
spider mites.
spotty on the tree, maybe just on one side, but the needles tend to look a little bit dirty because of accumulation of dirt and debris on the fine webbing that they have. It's, so you can check that out too, and whack the branch over a piece of paper and see if you can see the tiny little mites crawling. But it's usually a situation that it's in the springtime, stops by mid-June, and then picks up a little again in the fall. Summer, we're kind of in the clear for spruce mites.
All right, thanks, guys. This is a Knuckles County viewer, Elizabeth. They have cherry tomatoes. They're blooming, but the fruit won't set, and yet their big boy tomatoes are putting on fruit.
It all comes down to pollination with your tomatoes. Tomatoes are wind pollinated, but if you want to help those tomatoes along, what you can do is you can take a little child's paintbrush and you can go tomato bloom to tomato bloom to tomato bloom, and you can help the plant out. When it comes to the heat, doesn't really help out very much when it comes to blossom set, whether it be cucumber, squash, or tomatoes. There has to be a fine line. Also, the thing to keep in mind is some varieties can make a difference too on when they bloom and when they set. And then also there are products on the market like that are touted for helping set fruit on, and they really don't do a lot of good. So just save your money, focus on the cultural practices of that plant, making sure it's got adequate moisture, and just wait for them to set fruit.
This viewer wants to know whether they can prune back hail-damaged shrubs to a couple of inches, and should they do it now?
It depends on what kind of shrubs that they are. Now is not the optimal time. Rose of Sharon, definitely not. So it really depends.
Okay. We have someone who wants to prune the lower limbs of a spruce off right now.
That really comes to personal preference. No turf is going to grow under there because of all the heavy shade pattern. If they're dead, go ahead and remove them. They're not going to sprout any new needles, but personal preference, I wouldn't do it, but
That's you. So this one wants to know, how big do zucchini get?
ideal zucchini is supposed to be picked at 6 to 8 inches in length, not baseball bat. So 6 to 8 inches or whatever the variety is recommended is ideal.
What happens to the produce that we harvest out of the backyard farmer garden?
The backyard farmer garden produce either gets donated to the food pantry or to the backyard farmer helpers, the master gardeners.
Excellent, nice job. They
Yeah.
eat it first and then somebody else gets what's left.
So you shouldn't have that sandwich slice zucchini.
No, no, no. That's only good for zucchini bread, and that's it.
All right. Lauren, we have someone who says they have pink needles on one of their evergreens and they think it's a disease. Is that not, or is that?
Pink
No.
needles on an evergreen, particularly spruce, it can be some of the needle cast diseases. So I'd take a close look at that and redirect any irrigation not to be overhead.
Okay. A viewer has spots on their marguerite sweet potato leaves, brown spots. Anything on those ornamental sweet potatoes?
I'm not real sure on that one, actually. With sweet potatoes, I haven't seen a lot. I would question some of the different fungal leaf blights that we would have. I wouldn't recommend a fungicide, and I would, again, redirect irrigation and mulch to try to alleviate the problem, and it also could be bacterial.
All right. Does curly top in tomatoes spread from plant to plant?
It can. Anytime we have any of those viruses or things that are systemic in the plant, they can be spread by many different things. So curly top, not exactly sure. I think it may be leafhoppers, but I would rogue it out.
All right, can mushy potatoes go in the compost?
Yes.
Excellent last question on the part of the host, and good answer on the
Good job. Yeah. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
It's a gift.
All right, Dennis.
Okay, I'm ready.
Speaking of bats, do they nest in chimneys, fireplace chimneys?
Yes, very much so. It's one of the favorite places.
Okay, when do mice start moving into houses?
As soon as we start getting cooler nights, so probably the end of August.
What are the venomous snakes in Nebraska, and where are they?
We have 4 of them. 3 of them are in the southwest corner, and the prairie rattlesnake is in the western 2/3 of the state. That's 3 in the southeast corner are pretty much protected and hard to find. And they are the Massasauga rattlesnake, the timber rattlesnake, the prairie rattlesnake, and the copperhead.
Excellent. Are rabbits still rabbiting and producing those young ones?
Oh yes, every 21 to 24 days they're giving birth all summer long.
How big of a hollow tree do you need for raccoons to get in there and decide that's home forever?
Oh, they usually have more than one place they hide, but for raccoons, if it is a foot in diameter hollow, that's good enough.
Excellent. Nice job. Okay, you ready? What if I don't have 6 questions? I'm going to make up a
I know
tough
you got about
question.
8 or 10.
All right. Several viewers are saying their garden phlox is completely stippled and they're seeing insects on it.
Phlox plant bug, I would try to remove everything, and you might have a chance for some regrowth, at least to help the plant recover.
All right. A viewer sent in a question about a ball of black caterpillars on their walnut tree.
Might get walnut caterpillar, and when they're blackish like that, they're about ready to disperse and find some place to pupate. So I wouldn't worry about them at that stage. This is the end of the season for them.
Okay. Will Japanese beetles move from plant to plant, and does 7 work to control them?
7 can, but it also is risky for our pollinators, and so trapping, some quick knockdown insecticide like pyrethrins, permethrin would be okay, but you got to be careful.
All right. Do big black ants eat the leaves of roses?
No, they don't. They might be there because there might be some caterpillar, other insects, or something secreting honeydew that they're attracted to, like the aphids or leafhoppers.
All right. Is there an organic control of flea beetles and cucumber beetles?
Organic control, there's of course the screening that you can put on before we start to get flowering. And then otherwise, the only organically approved types of insecticides might be just pyrethrins, which only last as long as they make contact, and then possibly spinosad, but you don't have much of a choice.
Excellent.
And then I guess back to the Japanese beetle question, you know, they are quite mobile because they're day flyers and they fly and disperse like crazy. They're spreading very quickly across Nebraska. I saw them in Grand Island all over the knockout roses on the Cape.
We've got them all over.
Oh dear. All right, so instead of oh dear, oh wow. What did she bring us?
Gladys brought us some beautiful flowers as usual. This lightish blue one here is a hydrangea. It's Nico blue. In order to get those hydrangeas to get true blue, they need sulfur. In Nebraska, with our pHs of our soils, if there's not enough sulfur, the pHs are going to go up, which means that they're going to turn more of a pinkish color. So if you want blue hydrangeas, you have to add the sulfur. This one does bloom on old wood, so that's good to keep in mind when you're pruning your hydrangeas. You don't want to prune them all the way back down to the ground, because then you're not going to get the pretty blooms. Then the littler one is really a fun one. It's related to a cactus. It's globe thistle, echinops, I'm not good at my Latin. Native of hot slopes. You want to deadhead it regularly, otherwise it will spread and you will have a lot more than what you probably want. 3 to 4 foot tall. It's a really cool one to use for cut flowers because of the weird texture that it has, and it's also a great dried cut flower to use too. So it's really fun and unusual plants this week.
Excellent. She always comes up with great things from her garden for us. All right, Jim, you get the next picture. And this one is, again,
Oh,
what is it?
yes. I'm a little bit prepared for that one because I've had some questions on that before. This is a spurge hawk moth. It's very colorful. It's a horn-tailed caterpillar, just like you see there. And the moth would be the hummingbird moth that's very closely related to that white line sphinx that we see everywhere in Nebraska. And that moth was released in the 1960s by the USDA. It's European, and leafy spurge is from Europe. It came into our country about 1827, and it's been the spurge has been a scourge ever since then. And so that moth was introduced to help control leafy spurge. And so it's important that we have it, and it seems like they're getting to be more and more in number, and so we're glad for that.
Awesome. We won't tell people where we found that leafy spurge. Might have been on campus. All right, Dennis, this is what animal is it that loves her tomatoes? And I think we had 2 or 3 viewers that are doing that.
What animal loves tomatoes? Well, a lot of people, but I think by the teeth marks and the size, I would go with a tree squirrel. There's a number of animals they'll take, especially there with the scratch marks. It's a tree squirrel, most likely, if you have any tree squirrels in the area. But 13-line ground squirrels will also take tomatoes, but they have to be the low-hanging tomatoes. And if the whole tomato's gone or big bites taken out of it, then it's a groundhog or a woodchuck. But the way those were bitten and the size of them and the fact that most of them were green, I would go with a tree squirrel.
All right, and nothing you can do other than cage those
Yeah,
tomatoes.
cage trap. Because they're a fur bearer and game species, you should get a permit. But cage trapping, there's no, so to speak, toxicant. You could try something. If you're a type person like me who loves jalapenos and hot stuff and you don't mind hot tomatoes, just put some Tabasco sauce on all your tomatoes. It's not going to hurt the tomato. It'll give it a better flavor as far as I'm concerned. And I'll guarantee you the squirrels will take one bite and they won't touch that tomato again.
Oh,
So,
boy.
yeah, go that way.
And Lauren, on that note,
How do you follow that?
how do you follow
What do you
that?
do?
Let's go to a poor zucchini in a pot. This is an Omaha viewers, and they do this every year, whether they're in the garden or in a container. They've gotten a whole 1 fruit off of them, Elizabeth. So is this some wilt thing, Lauren, do you think?
It could be, and if they're growing them, one thing that can happen, if it is in the same, if they're growing in the same pot every year or something like that, you could have something building up in the soil. It's really hard to tell from that picture outside. It looks like some sort of a root rot that's going on. I would make sure your pots are draining well. Make sure you're not overwatering, actually, is what I'm thinking may be happening in that situation. Make sure the pot has good drainage, and then see what happens from there.
And if they're recycling pots, because it looked like it could have been a cattle lick tub, you need to know what was in that lick tub prior to that. And it is kind of black, so it might kind of absorb some of that heat too. And if it's on concrete, you can get that 1-2 punch of black container, baking from the concrete, stress from whatever else is in the soil. So that could have something to do with it too.
Excellent, thank you. Elizabeth, this is a viewer who says, please identify this nice looking but very prolific plant. He calls it a miniature hollyhock, and this is a Pender viewer and wants to know how to go about either transplanting it or spreading it to his daughter's home.
Well, the first question is, how much do you like your daughter? And how much does your daughter like you? It is a striped mallow. So it is a type of hollyhock. It's in the same family, very prolific. It spreads. And so it's one of the ones that if you have it and you like it, that's great. But you need to make sure that if you don't like it anymore, you have to be prepared how to get rid of it and how to control it. But it does very well, very prolific bloomer, very pretty, but you have to be careful because it can be a tad aggressive.
This is an Elkhorn viewer who found an almost black bee in a patch of poppy mallow, 2 small white or yellow stripes on its rear end.
Yeah,
Do we
very
know what
good
it is?
description. Yeah, because I see it all over the backyard farmer garden. It's a mid to late summer species, and these are called longhorn bees, or they're digging bees. They have their nests in the soil, but they're very abundant and they're excellent pollinators. And so the name of it, or the genus name, is Melissodes, kind of like Melissa, Melissodes bimaculatus, because there's 2 spots in the back. Bi, 2, macu, spot. So 2-spotted bee, I guess.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. We'll go out and look for them in the garden.
They'll be there.
All right, Dennis.
Okay.
Cute. Okay, Dennis, you
Yes.
have a viewer who sent in pictures of holes in the ground.
Okay.
And those are bricks for scale. And he thinks an insect has come out of there, but do you want to talk a little bit about why it's an
Yeah.
insect and not a
It looks
critter?
very much like a cicada killer wasp, which you
got
can
it.
have Jim talk about that. But some of the people see these holes and they think snakes. For one, we have 29 different snakes in the state of Nebraska. Only one can dig its own hole, and that's the bull snake, and it usually digs its hole in gopher mounds or mole mounds. Every other snake, every garter snake has to use the holes of other animals or cracks and crevices. If it is a vole or something like that, you would have very fine dirt around it, and the hole would go in on an angle. When the holes seem to go straight down and the dirt looks like coffee grounds or granular, it's more pointing to an insect and not a type of vertebrate animal.
All right, thank you, Dennis. Lauren, we have a near south viewer here in Lincoln who has been told that his grapevines have black rot and he should treat them with a systemic. What should be used? Can they save, or should we start over?
Let's talk about black rot a little bit on grapes. So that definitely is great pictures they sent in for that. It's our most common fungal disease on grapes. You really want to manage this year round, and you want to make sure you're using sanitation, make sure you're pruning, make sure you're controlling any of the mummies, all those fruits that become infected. Will hang there, and then that fungus overwinters in those structures. So in the winter months, you're pruning, you're doing your normal pruning for your grapevine, which I'm not an expert at that, but I know you got to prune it back a lot. And so you get rid of a lot of inoculum that way. And then also, if you're doing something to mulch around the base, or if you're doing something to cover any residue that's left, that's going to also reduce inoculum. Then the other thing you're doing, you're going to be looking at, trying to make sure you're not overhead irrigation, drip line, something that's not splashing water up on the leaves, because that's really going to favor the fungus. And then the next thing would be your fungicide application if you decided to do that. Now, I'm not a strong advocate for fungicide use in a backyard garden. Most of the time it's not needed. You're going to produce some, and if you do those cultural practices, you're probably going to be okay, to do that. If you have to do it, you can go to there's a lot of different fruit tree fungicides, and any of those fungicides are going to be pretty effective on that.
All right, thank you, Lauren. Elizabeth, we have a Greeley viewer who has seen some beautiful things, and they want to know what they are.
Well, they are not alone. The 281 corridor is in full bloom on the way. The purple one right there is hoary vervain. It is a perennial, and it starts blooming at the bottom and works its way up. So that helps to increase the length of time that those blooms are available. The yellow one is a type of primrose, and it's also in full bloom at this point in time. It's attracting a lot of those bees, and so it's one of the pretty ones that's in the roadside at this point in time. So 2 really pretty perennial flowers that are just starting to take off right now.
Excellent. Thank you, Elizabeth. Enjoy that drive. Well, we have a couple of announcements of things going on in the gardening world. The first is the Greater Omaha Iris Society sale on the 25th. We have information on the screen, including a number, an address, and a website. The second is the Lincoln Iris Society Rhizome Sale, August 2nd, 10 to 4. Also, address on the screen and a phone number. So get out there and get those iris installed for next spring. Jim, this is a Gehring viewer who has a question about termite problems in western Nebraska. They had heard that there are some pretty significant regional problems out there. Have you guys been involved in anything like that yet?
I don't know anything currently, but I know the distribution of termites in Nebraska, and there's 2 species. One of them is the eastern subterranean termite. Dennis, you know some of this too, don't you? And the other ones would be the arid subterranean termites, but we don't have, I don't believe we have any other species that we concern ourselves with, and the habits are the same, being that if you move your home into an area where they may already have nested in the soil, and there's access to the woody portions of a structure or whatever to those termites. They will make their mud tubes up into it and the like. When it gets dry, they're going to be under more pressure to find something moist.
Okay.
And so nothing special as far as
Okay.
episodes go.
All right, Dennis, we have about a minute.
Okay.
We have a couple of raccoon questions.
Okay.
The first is there a repellent for them? They're digging holes in the lawn and they're eating the zucchini, Elizabeth.
Okay. I'm not sure why they're digging. They're probably trying to just find a place to defecate. But there are repellents on the market. Their efficacy is very, very limited. And they're super smart. So getting a permit because they're a fur-bearing animal and cage or live trapping is your best way to get rid of them. Again, canine in the yard is extremely helpful, and that's the best way to go. The repellents to be not, you won't be satisfied with the amount of money you're spending, let's put it that way.
All right. Lauren, you have 10 seconds to answer why black-eyed Susan or rudbeckia has spots on the leaves.
It's a disease. Don't overhead water it. It is a fungal septoria, most likely.
And pick those leaves off and throw them away,
You
potentially?
can if you want something to do. Yeah. It's not really it's gonna keep going anyway, but it'll look nicer, but you can do that.
I should never ask them the very last question.